Hi everyone, I'm Naomi, 35 years old, and I never thought I'd be celebrating my birthday, holding my 4-year-old daughter Emma while watching my ex-husband laugh with his family through our apartment window. That night changed everything between us, and what happened next still gives me chills. Before I tell you how that painful night became the turning point of our lives, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and please hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own story. Looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago when I first met Tyler at that little coffee shop on Burnside Street in Portland. I was 27, working as a nurse at Oregon Health and Science University Hospital, grabbing my usual vanilla latte before my 12-hour shift. He was sitting in the corner booth, laptop open, completely absorbed in lines of code dancing across his screen. When he looked up and smiled, I swear my heart skipped a beat. Tyler was a software engineer at Intel, and everything about him seemed so put together. He had these warm brown eyes that crinkled when he laughed, and this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. Our first date was at Powell's Books, where we spent 3 hours wandering through the aisles talking about everything from Stephen King novels to our dreams of traveling the world together. Those early days were magical. Tyler would surprise me with handwritten notes in my scrubs pocket before I left for work. He learned to make my grandmother's chocolate chip cookies just because I mentioned missing them. When he proposed on the Oregon coast 2 years later, with the waves crashing behind us and tears streaming down both our faces, I knew I had found my forever person. Our wedding was small but perfect. Just our families and closest friends gathered in my parents' backyard. Tyler's vows still echo in my mind sometimes. He promised to always put our little family first, to be the kind of husband and father his own dad never was. I believed every word. When Emma was born 3 years later, Tyler was over the moon. He cried harder than I did when the doctor placed her in his arms. Those first few months he was incredible. He'd get up for the 2 a.m. feedings without complaint, singing off key lullabies while I recovered from my C-section. He painted her nursery sunshine yellow with tiny white stars on the ceiling, spending weeks making it perfect. But somewhere between Emma's first steps and her second birthday, something shifted. Tyler started working later, claiming new project deadlines that seemed to multiply every week. When he came home, he'd go straight to his laptop, barely acknowledging Emma's excited squeals of, "Daddy's home." I found myself handling bedtime routines, doctor appointments, and playground visits alone, more often than not. His mother, Patricia, didn't help matters. She had opinions about everything from how often I nursed Emma to the way I dressed her for family gatherings. During Sunday dinners at their house, she'd make pointed comments about how I was too protective, too anxious, too this or too that. Tyler would just nod along, never once defending me or our choices as parents. The weekends became the worst part. Tyler would disappear to his mother's house on Saturday mornings, claiming his family needed help with yard work or home repairs. He'd take Emma sometimes, but only when it was convenient for them. I'd spend those Saturdays alone catching up on laundry and wondering when I'd become a visitor in my own marriage. By the time Emma turned 2, the cracks in our foundation had become canyons. Tyler's absences weren't just physical anymore, they were emotional. When he was home, he felt like a stranger going through the motions of being a husband and father. I'd try to talk to him about my day, about Emma's new words or funny moments, but his responses were always distracted, always somewhere else. The first real fight happened on a Tuesday night in March. Emma had been fighting a fever all day, and I was exhausted from calling out of work to stay home with her. When Tyler walked in at 9:30 claiming he'd been stuck in meetings, I snapped. "Your daughter needed you today," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "I needed you today." His response cut deeper than any physical wound could have. "I can't be everywhere at once, Naomi. Some of us have responsibilities beyond this house." The way he said "this house" made it sound like a prison rather than our home. Patricia's phone calls became daily occurrences. She'd call Tyler during dinner, during Emma's bath time, during the few precious moments we had together as a family. Without fail, he'd answer walking into another room to discuss whatever crisis she'd manufactured that day. When I suggested he let it go to voicemail, sometimes he accused me of trying to control his relationship with his family. The breaking point came when Emma caught pneumonia just before her second birthday. I'd been up with her for 2 nights straight, monitoring her breathing, administering medications, trying to get fluids into her tiny body. Tyler had promised to come home early to help, but when I called his office at 6 p.m., his voicemail picked up immediately. I found out later he was at his brother Jake's apartment helping him move furniture for the third time that month. Meanwhile, I was racing through Portland traffic to the emergency room with our burning-up daughter in the back seat, her labored breathing the only sound louder than my own panicked heartbeat. The ER doctor was kind but firm. "She needs to be admitted for observation," he said, his gentle tone doing nothing to ease the terror gripping my chest. I called Tyler 17 times that night. 17. He finally answered at 3 a.m., sounding annoyed that I'd woken him up. "She's fine now, right?" he asked when I explained where we were and why. "I'll swing by after work tomorrow." Not "I'm on my way," not "I'm sorry I wasn't there." Just a casual promise to squeeze us into his schedule like a dentist appointment. That night, sitting beside Emma's hospital crib and watching the monitors track her vital signs, I realized I was already a single mother. The only difference was I still had Tyler's dirty laundry to wash and his half of the bills to worry about. Emma recovered, but something in me had fundamentally changed during those lonely hours in that sterile room. Jake became Tyler's priority in every situation. When Jake needed help with job interviews, Tyler took vacation days to drive him around town. When Jake wanted to try his hand at photography, Tyler bought him a $2,000 camera without discussing it with me first. But when Emma's preschool called because she had a stomach bug and needed to be picked up, Tyler was always in an important meeting that couldn't be interrupted. The promises started piling up like unpaid bills. "Next weekend we'll go to the zoo, just the three of us. I'll take Emma to swimming lessons this Saturday. We should plan a family vacation soon." Each broken promise chipped away another piece of Emma's trust and my hope. The end came not with a dramatic explosion, but with the quiet resignation of accumulated disappointments. Emma was 3.5 when Tyler forgot to pick her up from preschool on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of assisting with a complicated surgery when my phone buzzed with a call from Miss Thompson, Emma's teacher. "I'm so sorry to bother you at work," she said, her voice careful and professional. "Emma is still here and we close in 15 minutes. We haven't been able to reach Tyler." I had to scrub out of surgery, disappoint my surgical team, and face my supervisor's disappointed frown as I explained the situation. The drive to Emma's school felt endless, my mind racing with excuses and apologies I'd have to make. When I arrived, Emma was sitting in the office with her backpack, trying so hard to be brave that it broke my heart all over again. "Daddy forgot?" she asked in the car, her small voice carrying more understanding than any 3-year-old should have to bear. "Daddy's just busy, sweetheart," I replied, hating myself for making excuses for him even as the words left my mouth. That night, when Tyler finally came home at 10 p.m. with takeout Chinese food and a sheepish grin, I was done. "We can't keep doing this," I said quietly. Emma finally asleep upstairs after asking 6 times if Daddy would read her a bedtime story. "Doing what?" Tyler asked, genuinely confused. "I had a work emergency. These things happen." "No, Tyler, you had a choice, and you chose not to make Emma a priority, again." The conversation that followed was less of a fight and more of a funeral for whatever was left of our marriage. Tyler seemed almost relieved when I brought up divorce. "Maybe that's for the best," he said, not even trying to fight for us. "I can't seem to make anyone happy anymore." The fact that he saw our marriage as a performance rather than a partnership told me everything I needed to know. The divorce proceedings were as unbalanced as our marriage had been. Patricia hired Tyler an expensive attorney while I represented myself with legal aid and library books about family law. Tyler asked for visitation rights with Emma every other weekend, painting himself as a devoted father who'd been unfairly shut out. But reality was different from court documents. Tyler would show up for his scheduled visits maybe half the time, always with elaborate excuses about work obligations or family emergencies. The child support payments were sporadic at best, arriving weeks late with apologetic text messages about cash flow problems. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at the hospital to cover our expenses. Emma started staying with Mrs. Rodriguez, our 70-year-old neighbor, more nights than I cared to count. She'd fall asleep waiting for me to come home, and I'd carry her from Mrs. Rodriguez's couch to her own bed, my heart breaking a little more each time. The hardest moments were Emma's questions. "Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore? When is Daddy coming to see me? Did I do something wrong?" How do you explain to a preschooler that sometimes adults fail the people they're supposed to love most? How do you tell your daughter that her father chose his own comfort over her happiness without crushing her spirit entirely? Those nights when Emma cried herself to sleep missing her daddy. I'd sit outside her bedroom door and cry too. Not for Tyler, but for the father Emma deserved and would never have. Not for our marriage, but for the family I'd dreamed of building and had to let die. My 34th birthday fell on a Saturday in October, one of those crisp autumn days when Portland shows off its golden beauty. Tyler was supposed to have Emma for the weekend, one of his increasingly rare visits that I'd actually been looking forward to, because it meant I could sleep in for once and maybe read a book without interruption. He called at 9 a.m. while I was making coffee, his voice carrying that familiar tone of forced casualness that always preceded disappointment. "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I can't take Emma this weekend. Family stuff came up, you know how it is." I didn't know how it was actually because I'd never put family stuff ahead of my daughter, but I swallowed the sharp response rising in my throat. "What kind of family stuff?" I asked instead. "Jake's having some people over and Mom needs help setting up. It's kind of a big deal." The fact that Jake's party was more important than his scheduled time with Emma shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but it did. After hanging up, I found Emma in her bedroom, already dressed in her favorite purple dress, with the twirly skirt, her backpack packed with the stuffed elephant she never traveled without. "Is Daddy coming soon?" she asked, her face bright with anticipation. "Actually, sweetheart, Daddy can't come today. But that means we get to spend the whole day together, just you and me." I watched her little face process this information, the light dimming just a fraction before she nodded and started unpacking her bag. We made the best of it. Emma insisted on making me a birthday breakfast of scrambled eggs that were somehow both runny and burned toast cut into heart shapes with cookie cutters and orange juice served in her favorite plastic tea set. She presented me with a drawing she'd made at preschool, a picture of two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow with "Happy Birthday, Mommy" written in her careful 4-year-old handwriting. We spent the afternoon at Laurelhurst Park, feeding ducks and playing on the swings. Emma picked dandelions and presented them to me like the most precious bouquet, insisting I make a wish on everyone. For those few hours watching her run around the playground with pure joy, I almost forgot about the hollow ache that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. But evening came, as it always does, and with it the reminder of everything we were missing. I was giving Emma a bath when I heard laughter drifting through our thin apartment walls. Our building faced Tyler's mother's house across a small courtyard, close enough that sound carried on quiet nights. After getting Emma into her pajamas and settled with a book, I made the mistake of looking out our living room window. Patricia's house was lit up like a celebration, warm light spilling from every window. Through the large picture window in their living room, I could see Tyler clearly. He was sitting at the dining table, head thrown back in laughter at something Jake had said. Patricia was bustling around with platters of food, and there were other people there too. Friends and extended family, creating the kind of warm, boisterous gathering I remembered from our early days together. Tyler looked happy, really genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. He was wearing the blue sweater I'd given him for Christmas, the one he'd claimed he loved but never wore. His whole face was animated as he talked and gestured completely at ease in a way he never was in our apartment anymore. Emma fell asleep in my arms on the couch while I continued watching this scene of domestic bliss that we were completely excluded from. Her small body was warm and trusting against mine, her breathing deep and even. In the silence of our dim apartment, the contrast was stark. Here was Tyler's daughter missing him on what should have been their weekend together, while he celebrated with people who saw him every day. That's when it hit me, really hit me. Tyler hadn't just chosen his family over us in moments of conflict. He'd written us out of his life entirely. We were the obligation, the burden, the complicated situation he'd rather avoid. They were his real life, his joy, his chosen family. Sitting there with Emma sleeping peacefully in my arms, I made a promise that would change everything. I whispered it into her soft hair, my voice steady despite the tears rolling down my cheeks. "We're going to build something better, baby girl. I promise you, we're going to create a life so full of love and possibility that you'll never feel like you're missing anything." That night, after putting Emma to bed, I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook and wrote down everything I wanted for our future. Not dreams or wishes, but concrete goals. A better job that would give us financial security. A nice home where Emma could have friends over. Opportunities for her to learn and grow and discover her talents. A life where she knew without question that she was someone's first priority. I was done waiting for Tyler to remember he had a daughter. I was done making excuses for his absence. Most importantly, I was done letting his failures define our possibilities. That birthday night, surrounded by the sound of someone else's happiness, I found something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The next Monday morning, I walked into the hospital administrator's office and asked about tuition reimbursement programs. I'd been a registered nurse for 8 years, but I'd never finished my bachelor's degree. Getting my BSN would open doors to management positions, specialized roles, and most importantly, a salary that could support the life I wanted to build for Emma. The nursing program at Portland State offered evening and weekend classes designed for working professionals. It meant 18 months of juggling 12-hour hospital shifts with coursework, clinical rotations, with bedtime stories, studying with single motherhood. But as I looked at the course catalog that night, Emma coloring beside me at our kitchen table, I knew I could do it. Sarah Martinez became my unexpected ally. She was a charge nurse in the cardiac unit who'd noticed me staying late to chart notes and arriving early to prepare for difficult cases. When I mentioned my school plans during a break one evening, her whole face lit up. "I did the same program 5 years ago," she said. "Best decision I ever made, but you're going to need help with childcare." Sarah had 2 teenagers and lived just 15 minutes from our apartment. She offered to watch Emma during my Saturday clinical rotations and some evening study sessions. "My kids love little ones," she insisted when I tried to protest. "You'd actually be doing me a favor. They need to learn some responsibility." The first few months were brutal. I'd work a full shift, rush home to spend a couple hours with Emma before bedtime, then study until 1 or 2 in the morning. Anatomy and physiology, pharmacology, nursing theory, research methods. The information felt overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a fire hose while running a marathon. Emma adapted to our new routine with the resilience that children possess when they feel secure in their parents' love. She learned to do her coloring quietly while I created elaborate tea parties for her stuffed animals during my online lectures, and fell asleep to the soft sound of my typing more nights than I care to count. Mrs. Rodriguez became our unofficial grandmother during this time. When I had late classes or clinical rotations, she'd pick Emma up from preschool and feed her dinner before I got home. She taught Emma to make tortillas and told her stories about growing up in Mexico, filling our lives with warmth and tradition in ways I never could have provided alone. Tyler's sporadic calls became even less frequent as I got busier. He'd check in every few weeks with brief conversations that felt more like obligation than genuine interest. "How's school going?" he'd ask, as if my education were a hobby rather than our ticket to a better future. He never asked about Emma's progress in preschool, her new friendship with the little girl down the hall, or how she was handling our adjusted schedule. The few times Tyler did exercise his visitation rights, Emma would come home confused and slightly sad. "Daddy seemed tired," she'd report, or "Daddy kept checking his phone." It became clear that even when physically present, Tyler was emotionally unavailable in ways that hurt Emma more than his complete absence might have. But something beautiful was happening in our small apartment. Emma was thriving with the stability and attention I could finally give her. She started piano lessons at the community center, her small fingers picking out simple melodies with intense concentration. She discovered a love for books, and we'd spend Sunday mornings at the library, her arms full of picture books about brave princesses and adventurous animals. Miss Thompson, Emma's preschool teacher, pulled me aside one afternoon with the kind of smile that made me think good news was coming. "Emma is reading at a first-grade level," she said proudly. "She's also showing real leadership skills with the other children. You should be very proud of what you're raising." Walking to our car that day, Emma skipping beside me and chattering about her friend Sophie's pet hamster, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. We were building something real and lasting together. The loneliness that had defined those first months after Tyler left was being replaced by a sense of purpose and partnership with my amazing daughter. 18 months later, I walked across the stage at Portland State University with my Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Emma cheering from the audience beside Mrs. Rodriguez and Sarah's entire family. The weight of the diploma in my hands represented more than academic achievement. It was proof that I could rebuild our lives from the ground up. The job offers started coming within weeks of graduation. The position that changed everything was head nurse of the pediatric emergency department at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. It meant more responsibility, longer hours, and stress levels I'd never experienced. But it also meant a salary that could give Emma the childhood I'd dreamed of providing. Our new apartment was in a safe neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a playground just 2 blocks away. Emma's room had a window seat where she could read and watch the seasons change in the big oak tree outside. For the first time since Tyler left, I felt like we had a real home, rather than just a place to sleep. Emma started kindergarten at a school known for its music and arts programs. Within weeks, her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was telling me about Emma's exceptional creativity and academic ability. "She's reading chapter books already," Mrs. Patterson marveled during our first parent-teacher conference. "And her writing shows remarkable emotional depth for a 5-year-old. The Honda Civic I managed to buy wasn't fancy, but it was reliable and safe, and most importantly, it was ours." Emma named it Buttercup and insisted on patting the dashboard every morning before school. "Good job, Buttercup," she'd say seriously. "Take care of Mommy at work today." Of course, success brought its own complications. Word of my promotion somehow reached Tyler, probably through the network of mutual acquaintances that exist in every mid-sized city. His phone calls became more frequent, and for the first time in months, he started following through on some of his visitation promises. But Emma had changed too. At 5, she was more aware of the patterns in Tyler's behavior, more protective of the life we'd built together. When he'd show up 20 minutes late for planned outings, she'd comment matter-of-factly, "Daddy's not very good at time." When he'd promised to take her to the zoo, but end up at his mother's house instead, she'd shrug and say, "Maybe next time." Patricia called one evening, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Congratulations on your promotion," she said. "Tyler mentioned you're doing quite well for yourself now." The implication hung in the air. Now that I had money and stability suddenly, I was worthy of acknowledgement from Tyler's family. The call that really bothered me came from Tyler himself on a Tuesday evening in November. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice carrying a confidence I hadn't heard in years. "Maybe we should revisit the custody arrangement. Emma's getting older and I'd like to have more time with her. Be more involved in her life." I looked across our living room where Emma was curled up in her favorite reading chair, completely absorbed in a Junie B. Jones book. Her long, dark hair fell like a curtain around her face, and she was unconsciously humming the melody from her latest piano piece. This was the child Tyler wanted to suddenly claim, now that our lives looked successful from the outside. "Emma's schedule is pretty full," I said carefully. "Piano lessons, reading club, playdates with friends. She's built a routine that works for her." What I didn't say was that this routine didn't include space for a part-time father who showed up when convenient and disappeared when life got complicated. But Tyler was persistent in a way he'd never been when it came to actually parenting. He started texting regularly, sending Emma pictures from his day, asking about school and piano lessons. Emma would show me these messages with polite interest, but no real excitement. Daddy sent another picture of his lunch. She'd announce, then go back to whatever she was doing. The truth was, Emma had learned to thrive without Tyler's inconsistent presence. She had friends' activities, and most importantly, the unshakable knowledge that I would always be there for her. When she won first place in her school's reading competition, I was in the front row cheering. When she had nightmares about monsters under her bed, I was the one who checked every corner and left the hallway light on. When she discovered she loved science and wanted to learn about planets, I was the one who bought glow-in-the-dark stars for her ceiling and checked out library books about space exploration. Our first real vacation together was a long weekend in San Francisco. Emma's face when she saw the Golden Gate Bridge for the first time, her excitement at Fisherman's Wharf, her careful selection of postcards to send to Mrs. Rodriguez and Sarah, these moments were ours. No one could claim them or diminish them or show up late and ruin them. On our last night in the hotel, Emma looked up from the bed where she was organizing her collection of souvenir snow globes and said, "Mommy, this was the best trip ever, just you and me." Her words weren't meant to exclude anyone or make a point about Tyler's absence. To her, our little family of 2 felt complete and perfect exactly as it was. Today, as I write this, Emma is 6 years old and I'm 36, and our life looks nothing like what I planned when I married Tyler 8 years ago. It looks better. Emma is confident, creative, and kind with a sense of security that comes from knowing she's someone's whole world. She plays piano with passion, reads voraciously, and approaches every day with curiosity and joy. Tyler still calls occasionally, but our conversations are brief and mostly about logistics. He's dating someone new, a woman his age, who doesn't have children and doesn't seem particularly interested in getting to know Emma. When he does take Emma for visits, She comes home with stories that sound pleasant but distant, like reporting on a field trip rather than time with her father. I've started seeing someone too, actually. David is a pediatric physician at Dornbecker, and he makes me laugh in ways I'd forgotten I could. But I'm not rushing into anything. Emma and I have built something precious together, and any new relationship will have to enhance rather than complicate what we've created. The most beautiful part of our story is watching Emma understand her own strength. Last month, when Tyler canceled a planned visit at the last minute because Jake needed help moving again, Emma just nodded and asked if we could have a movie night instead. There was no disappointment, no tears, just the practical acceptance of a child who's learned that her happiness doesn't depend on other people's choices. Mrs. Rodriguez still lives next door, and Sarah's teenagers fight over who gets to babysit Emma when I have evening meetings at work. Emma has piano recitals where she plays for audiences who adore her birthday parties, where she's surrounded by friends who think she's amazing, and school projects, where she writes about her hero, which she says is me. Sometimes I think about that night 3 years ago when I sat holding Emma and watching Tyler celebrate with his family. I was so focused on what we didn't have that I couldn't see what we did. Emma had a mother who would move heaven and earth to give her a good life. She had love, stability, and unlimited possibilities stretching ahead of her. Tyler taught me something invaluable, though he never meant to. When he chose his comfort over our family's needs, he forced me to discover strength I didn't know I possessed. When he left us out of his real life, he cleared the way for us to build an authentic life of our own. When he failed as a father, he made space for Emma to see that one parent's love given completely and consistently is worth more than two parents' love given conditionally. I don't have anger toward Tyler anymore. I have gratitude. Not for the pain he caused or the promises he broke, but for the gift of discovering who Emma and I could become when we stopped waiting for someone else to complete our family. We were already complete. We just had to learn to see it. Emma often tells me she wants to be a doctor like David, or a teacher like Miss Patterson, or maybe a pianist who travels the world. Whatever she chooses, she'll know that her dreams matter, that her voice deserves to be heard, and that she never has to settle for someone else's leftover attention. If you're going through something similar right now, if you're holding your child and wondering how you'll make it alone, let me tell you something. Your strength is greater than your struggles. The love you have for your child is enough to build a beautiful life. Sometimes the people who leave us do us the greatest favor of all by getting out of the way so we can become who we were always meant to be. What about you? Have you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had? Have you built something beautiful from what felt like ruins? Please share your story in the comments below, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about resilience, hope, and the incredible power of love. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to remember their own strength today. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the best chapters of our lives begin when we stop waiting for someone else to write them for us.